What's the matter? Oh, you forgot.
There we
Dang
go.
it. Well,
We
okay.
missed the introduction.
We're talking about power struggles.
Yeah.
In case you're listening to the
If
recording.
you're listening to this,
We forgot to start the recording earlier. So yeah, so these power struggles can cause a lot of misery in our marriages. And so this what was it called? Well, this interview between Patrick Coffin and Stephanie Gordon. So Ask Your Husband, a Catholic Guide for Femininity. Basically, it's basically a call for Catholic husbands to imitate Christ through servant leadership, but then also for Catholic wives to submit to their husbands. Okay, and yes, St. Paul does talk about mutual submission, but he also does talk specifically about wives submitting. And so she's getting a lot of what's the word? Derision. Yeah, like people don't like what she's writing and are calling her a hypocrite because it's kind of like, well, you just were writing a book. How can you be saying? Okay, the thing that probably got people going the most was that she said, and this is Catholic social teaching. She was stressing that if you've got kids at home, you should stay at home. Like you can work at home, but you shouldn't be working outside of the home. So a lot of people got really riled up about that. But it's like, she didn't make this up. Like this has been historically the way to, you know. So there are a lot of people look at submission as kind of slavery and headship as just a dictatorship. But that's not what we're talking about. And that's not what she's talking about. That's not what Jesus is talking about. That's not what St. Paul's talking about. Okay. So how do we deal with all of this? I was thinking it might be good, just, I don't know, I'm feeling kind of like it could go either way, this little talk here. I mean, we could talk quite a bit about feminism and about that power struggle, but I'm not sure that that's relevant
to our situation.
Well, to like what you guys want us to talk about, what would be most helpful to you? Because we could talk more about just like the daily struggles, like who does what kind of stuff. I think.
Well, let's just talk for a minute about why power struggles happen and what they are. And so, I mean, generally, a power struggle arises when either one or both of the people in the relationship don't submit to the plan that God has for them in the relationship, because they want something more. They want to assert their own will, and you know, they want to insist on their own way. And St. Paul, I mean, he prefaces the whole discussion on marriage with these words: be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so everything is predicated on reverence for Christ. That's if we have reverence for Christ, then we're not going to be insisting on our own way, insisting that, you know, my needs be met, that, you know, that I'm satisfied, that, you know,
my way is right.
My way is the right way, you know, because I reverence Christ. And because I reverence Christ, well, then I'm going to reverence my wife because Christ lives in her and she me. And yeah, there is a special dynamic between husbands and wives. St. Paul says that the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. And of course, Christ said he came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And so certainly he wasn't about self-gratification. He wasn't about bossing the apostles around, but he was the head. You know, he was the leader. That's clear, and he still is clearly the leader of the church. But again, it's a servant leadership, and you know, and
it's a kingship in that case.
Yeah,
and it's a kingship actually in the family too. But.
Right, yeah, and so husbands then, you know, are called to serve their wives and their families by being the leader, and that means accepting responsibility for making decisions, And in most cases, for bringing in the bulk of the income and, protecting the family. Now, in some cases, a husband will get sick and, and the wife will have to take over, some of the household chores or even providing for the income. But, that's just part of the vagaries of life. But in general, the plan is that the husband lead the way. And so what does it mean for the wife to be subject to her husband or to submit to her husband? It means that she comes under his mission, that and his mission again is to serve her and to provide for her and to protect her and
to lead the way too.
And to lead the way.
Yeah. And there's a spiritual protection too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm still wondering if we should do more, like, because we could really go all out on feminism if you want to talk about that, or we could just talk about power struggles in general.
Well, maybe there's not as much to talk about. I mean,
sorry, because we both were kind of preparing in different ways.
I mean, let's just talk for a few more minutes about the way out of power struggles.
Okay.
And so why don't you folks who are watching just share with us what do you find helps diffuse power struggles in your relationships?
Yeah, if anybody wants to.
If anybody wants to share.
We have some things to say, but you guys can go first.
If anybody's got anything to say. That's okay.
Okay. Well, I guess one of the things that I'm trying to learn, but I still have a long ways to go, is just to grow in the virtue of humility, because I think I have a tendency, I have a tendency to think that my ideas are right or the best. And so I get pushy. And obviously, if I'm pushy, that means I'm striving for power. So, I mean, I have admitted that before in this context. So you guys are probably, hopefully you don't think I'm a total bag, because I don't think I'm a total bag, but I do get pushy, and I do think that my ideas are good. And so I need to grow in humility, because yes, sometimes my ideas are good, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes Paul has better ideas. And sometimes, when I've pushed, I've been wrong, and I should have listened to Paul, and I kept pushing, and he also should have put me in my place more and said, no, I'm, I mean, not in a forceful way,
no,
like I'm the head of the family, shut up. I mean, you don't have to be mean about it, but if I'm inappropriately trying to lead, I don't know, like some of you guys might just be thinking, this is pretty countercultural what we're saying. A lot of times, a lot of the things that we say are, but that's because I really believe, like we've just been teaching, we've taught now 30 hours,
something like that.
Yeah, about 33 hours out of a 36-hour class for seminarians and Catholic school teachers on marriage and sexuality in the Christian tradition. And we've been going even from all the Old Testament, right from Adam and Eve, and then through the Old Testament and the prophets, and then into obviously the New Testament and Christ coming, and then the early church fathers and the patristic fathers, and all the way through the different councils. And we've been looking at the teaching of Christ and the apostles and the church all the way through on marriage and family. And a lot of it is still pretty hard to swallow. If you're
in our culture,
because we are not living in accord with a lot of basic church teachings. And this is one of them. And one of the reasons why, I mean, feminism is, well, okay, like, sorry, I keep forgetting, Stephanie Gordon, the one who wrote this book about Ask Your Husband, a Catholic Guide for Femininity. Okay, that got so many people riled up. It's like she said, see if I can find it. Well, basically she believes that that modernism, which is really decimating the church these days, it's actually at the headwind of it is feminism. Like that really, it goes back to the Garden of Eden, like this vying for power, this not wanting to submit to God's design is what kind of gets everything going. And I'm not sure if, I don't know that I believe that all of the evil is flowing out of that. But I do think, back again to what my dad said when I was like about 8 years old, and these feminists are ruining the family. And I just remember being a little girl and kind of going, oh, that's bad. But I mean, that's kind of as far as it went. But I remember thinking of it later when I just kind of saw some evidence of it. So, I have been suspicious of feminism, but then I've also kind of taken advantage sometimes of feminism. And sometimes I think I've been a bit of a feminist. And certainly when I'm well, you have to kind of, you kind of have to draw a distinction. I mean, sometimes I'm just being proud if I'm just thinking that my ideas are self-righteous. And then sometimes, but okay. One of the things that in our culture that all of you must have noticed, because it started when I was just a little girl. Well, it maybe started long before then, I don't know. But the way that men are always put down in the media, and they're kind of like these buffoons, and they're always doing dumb things, and then it's the woman comes along and she kind of fixes it all, and she's all competent, and like, and it's kind of like, well, why did you marry an incompetent guy then? That's your problem. I mean, like, but it's like there is a real slant in our culture towards trying to show that men are less than women. I mean, it's actually quite built into our culture. Do you agree with that, or do you think that I'm overstating it?
It seems that the mainstream media pushes that
I think,
narrative. Go ahead.
and I think that it pushes a lack of respect for the beauty of the man and the woman being separate, not the same. We're meant to come together in union, in a beautiful union, but not to be the same. So I definitely think that there's been and the craziness of what's going on, like, to all become one. What? No, that's not the way God created us. To come together and fit together beautifully like a puzzle, not to be the same piece, but to come. And definitely there's an attack on all that. I feel it very much so.
Yeah, I agree, Kathy. Yeah, I agree.
A beautiful example of a Catholic mother mystic saint is Anna Maria Tiegi, who was born like in the 1780s, I think anyway, at some point in the 1780s, and she died before 1850. So that's roughly the time she lived. And she was in Italy. And she started off her marriage, in kind of a secular fashion. She was a bit vain and into nice clothes, and not that there's anything wrong with nice clothes, but she was just focused on that. And then she had an encounter with a priest that really changed her life, and she became very serious about her faith, and she from then on lived much more simply and lived a very prayerful life, and she was given extraordinary mystical gifts, and she became a counselor to priests and bishops and cardinals and even popes who would come to see her, because probably the most unusual mystical gift that she was given was she saw this bright orb, like a sun, and in it she could see any place in the world, and she could see people in the past, and she could see events in the future, and she could read people's souls, and she saw the people in purgatory or hell or heaven. I mean, most amazing thing. And yet she was just a simple housewife, and mom. And she might have a cardinal who was, conversing with her, And when it was time for, her husband to come home and, and to tend her children and make dinner, she'd, kind of usher the cardinal out, and take care of her family duties. And so she, she died, and her case, was put forward. She was beatified in 1920, and her case for canonization is still being carried forward by the Trinitarians. She was a third order Trinitarian, and just a wonderful and simple woman. And she's the patroness of mothers and patroness of housewives and families. Anna Maria Taigi.
And did she live in Rome?
I think maybe she did.
Because if the cardinals were coming to visit her, or maybe she was.
Well, there are cardinals not only in Rome, but.
Oh yeah, I suppose that's true. Okay. There was something that you said that I was going to respond, and anybody can jump in here. What was it? Well.
Oh yeah, and so part of the reason she came to mind was her husband. He was a man of faith, but he had a bad temper and he was tyrannical. And she found that rather than fighting back, she would just win him over with kindness and with smiles. And eventually, her patience and kindness won him over and helped tame his, rude and wild heart. And so it was her humility and kindness won the day, rather than trying to, fight for power or control.
And she's not the only saint who had a really tough marriage. There's is it Saint Rose of Lima? Is that one?
Saint Rose of Lima.
And there's some other ones too. I can't remember who they all are. And there's the lady the couple that we brought up before, the French couple. When he became a Dominican saint.
Oh yeah.
Elizabeth Lesieux.
Yeah, Lesieux.
And anyways, and
Felix
he was,
and Elizabeth.
yeah, and then he wasn't like such a bad husband. He was like a very staunch atheist though.
Yeah.
And anyways, I think we've shared that story before. But the faithfulness and the humility and the living out of God's design for marriage and God's design for masculinity and femininity.
She was in Rome. Yeah.
She was in Rome. Okay. We reject God's plan to our own peril. When we think that we know better than God, and a lot of people seem to think that they know better than God these days. Like probably one of the most flagrant things that we see recently is just this growing number, and a lot of times it's young women, like just in their early teens and stuff, who are just saying, no, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, or I'm a young man, and then they're being, well, bad enough that they're very confused, and then they're maybe finding some identity within this group of people, this group of like-minded people, but then they're being, there's all these people who are trying to protect that and saying, yes, you can be whoever you want to be. And it's like they're rejecting that there's any givenness from God, that
or givenness to human nature.
Right.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't say that, because I actually do know someone who believes that he's a cat. And so, but that's a mental illness. And so, and gender dysphoria is also a mental illness, and it has always been called that in the DSM, and even now. Is it gender dysphoria or gender? There's another word for it. I can't remember if it changed from just gender dysphoria or into gender dysphoria. But anyway, so because there's a lot of this pseudo compassion, because it is pseudo compassion. It is pseudo-compassion. It's fake compassion. If you say, oh, well, they feel that way, so I have to be kind and good to them and let them think that. No, that is not true love. That is fake compassion. They may well be suffering a lot, but is it really, if, and sadly, this is happening in the schools now too. It's like there's a push and we don't have to spend much time on this because we could spend a lot of time on that too. But you know, on, oh, well, if this little girl is confused and thinks that she's a boy, well, then the school should make sure that they don't even have to tell the parents sometimes in certain districts, which is just horrible. It's like we were sharing with the seminarians and Catholic school teachers the other day. There's a really good book called A Map of Life by Frank Sheed, who's a kind of a lay theologian from the
Australia.
Yeah, but was he 1800s?
No,
He was 1900s.
1940s,
Okay.
50s.
Okay, so anyways, Frank Sheed, very common sense. He's written a really good book called Society and Sanity, and another one, something sanity. Like he's written a couple just on sanity. So, oh, you're gonna write it. Oh, A Map of Life, Frank Sheed, and then the other one's called Society and Sanity,
Right.
and I forget what the other one's called, but it also has sanity in it. But he's in this book, A Map of Life, that Paul just wrote down. There's a chapter on the law and suffering. And I really like it because it talks about that there are things that are worse than suffering. Society and Sanity. That's right, Frank Sheed. Oh yeah,
Right.
it says French. Frank. Yeah. And that there are some things that are worse than suffering. And when he used the example of, let's say you're taking your departmentals and you know you need to get really good grades to get into university. Okay, so and your professor or proctor, whoever's watching you take the exams or something, they feel really sad for you because, and they feel compassion. They're sad for you because you're struggling with the test, and they don't want you to have to struggle. Like they're saying, oh, this poor person, they're going to probably flunk the test. And so what they do is they change the test and they actually write it so that it's way easier. Okay, and so they're doing it because they have compassion and they don't want them to suffer. But I mean, are they really doing a loving thing? Because basically, even if that person gets into university, they're going to really struggle. And then they've paid a whole bunch of money and they put a whole bunch of time into it and they're not going to pass. I mean, it's not, and he uses that example. He says, like, okay, if God establishes the law, and then we want to soften up the law because you know what, it's kind of mean. It's kind of mean and it's hard. And this person is really suffering. And you know what, like, they're divorced, but they want to remarry and they haven't been able to get the declaration of nullity. And so, you know what, we're just going to change the law a bit, you know, and we're going to just change it because it's more loving. Or, you know, I don't want to tell them that cohabiting is wrong because, you know, that would make them feel badly. And, pick your choice, but a lot of them do have to do with marriage and sexuality, right? Or, well, I certainly wouldn't want to say anything about that homosexuality, any homosexual acts are wrong, because that would just make people feel horrible. And love is love. And so, I'm not going to say anything about that. And I think the Bible is way too harsh. Well, really, I mean, it's not up to me to decide on God's law. God is the one who created us, and there is a givenness. And I mean, we just yesterday taught the class. It was our 11th class out of 12 with the seminarians and teachers, and it was basically on homosexuality and contraception. So
two tough teachers.
They're both really hard, and both of them, a lot of people in our society think it's insane if you believe what the church actually teaches about them. And so, but we were encouraging them, saying, you know what, you know the truth, and you can see, because you followed it all along. You've had like 33 hours now on what does the Bible say? What is God's design? What have all of the popes said? What has the magisterium said? What have these evangelical councils said? What have the church ecumenical council? This is, and we've looked at philosophy, we've looked at human nature, we've looked at the great philosophers and the theologians, and they're in unison until we get to the 20th century where there's, well, I mean, occasionally there's some, but really it's very clear when we've been going through this, it's very clear how it goes. And so anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. So anyway, we're talking about power struggles, aren't we? How did I get into all that? Okay, we've said, I don't even know how I got into that. Sorry, I think because we were just talking about it yesterday. But hopefully you'll forgive me. So we'll move back to power struggles.
Yeah.
And there
so
are power struggles.
was there more you wanted to say about the book, about
Okay, well, I
Stephanie
think
Gordon's
she kind of made me laugh. She was laughing actually quite a bit during the interview too with Patrick Coffin. If you want to watch it, you can just go on and just put in Patrick Coffin and Stephanie Gordon, Ask Your Husband, A Catholic Guide for Femininity. But you know what is so awful really about St. Paul? Why do we think that we have to censor or cancel culture St. Paul? I mean, you know, of course, the Bible is very clear and Christ is very clear. I mean, look at what he's sitting and talking with a Samaritan woman. You shouldn't A, you know, be talking with a woman, and B, certainly not a Samaritan. I mean, he's breaking, you know, convention. So, and he always treated women with utmost respect and dignity and did not look down on them. And there weren't second-class citizens. I mean, like they, you know, it was a group of wealthier kind of devout women who bankrolled his mission, right? And they would travel with him. So, and I mean, his mother, I mean, the greatest human person aside from Jesus, you know, I mean,
he was
divine and human.
He was a divine person with
a human nature. Human natures. I would get that right.
He's a divine person with two natures.
Thank
divine
you. I always
human.
Okay. Yes. So the greatest human person, Mary, our mother, and his mother. You know, how could anyone say that he had a lesser view of women? I mean, and he's God. God does not have a lesser view of women. It's just that we do have some different roles, and that's a good thing. And he has given us, I mean, what a privilege to be able to raise. I mean, the most important thing anybody could do on the planet is to help raise up the next generation.
Well, you know, I think again of Blessed Anna Maria Thiegi. I mean, look at the tremendous influence she had on the church. I mean, she was a counselor to priests, bishops, cardinals, and even popes. And yet she was, you know, she was a simple housewife. And, you know, and she wasn't, you know, insisting that she ought to be a bishop, she ought to be a priest, you know, and she accepted her role, and God used her in that role. And it was because of her humility that she was able to have such a profound effect and such great gifts.
And you could just change what he just said about her to Mary, Mother of God. Mary, a simple housewife, you know, she put her vocation to be a wife and mother above everything else. And it was her simple humility that had the biggest impact on the universe. There's Faith. Hi, Faith. That's my sister.
Something in there, because one time I heard it said that power in the church is holiness. So, you know, we're used to using the word power as this thing of like lording over or whatever, but you know, the church has a different economy, and I've always loved that, and I've always remembered it. So it's not about your position. It's not about this worldly kind of view. It's about holiness. So the holier you are, it's like that's power in the church. And I thought that was really insightful.
That's great. That's great. Well, that's great because, I mean, again, think about the Mother of God, right? I mean, who's more powerful? Who's more powerful, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. I really like that. Thank you. Really
coming live from British Columbia.
Yeah, thanks, Faith.
Yes. I'm leaving now. I'm having to go. Bye.
Oh, okay, bye. Thanks for popping in.
Thanks for popping in.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, that is a really good point, because I think we do get our words confused sometimes, whether it's like we get confused about authority and power and submission. I mean, like we need to define our terms more. And so when we're talking about, I think if we're talking about a power struggle, then we're talking about like more of the vying for power. But if we're talking about, that's true. If, like Faith was saying, if we're equating, well, if we're seeing that true power comes from holiness, from being associated with God. I mean, Christ, yeah, that's good. Okay, so what should we go into next? we have several things we could talk about. Probably not. Well, I mean, we could talk a bit more about feminism. What would be most helpful? Do you guys want to? I'm trying to think of, because I don't know that we want to talk about feminism much longer, or do you? What we can, I mean, we have talked somewhat about conflict and how we deal with conflict and negotiation and that kind of thing, and how there's give and take, and how conflict in and of itself is not a bad thing. So we could go into that a bit more, because power struggles typically are like, well, sometimes it's just like, I refuse to give in here. And if you're both saying that, like, I refuse to give in, and I'm sure that I'm right.
And I mean, one of the antidotes to getting into that situation or is recognizing, that beneath that insistence on your own way is a lack of faith and also fear, because you're afraid that if things don't go your way, then it's going to result in unhappiness, dissatisfaction, some sort of disaster. But if we trust that that God's in charge and that Christ is in control, we don't have to, we can let go, and we don't have to manipulate things or control things to see that our will is accomplished. Rather, we strive to see that God's will is accomplished. We surrender ourselves to God's will. I like the emphasis in Elizabeth Kindleman in The Flame of Love, about surrendering to the will of God. Jesus, I trust in you. Your will be done. I give you my will. Please give me yours in return. Let thy kingdom come. Let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So what we want to do is to give up our will and to ask Christ to give us his will, and so that we live in the center of his will. And if husband and wife are both doing that, it's going to make for a much more harmonious relationship. And even if only one starts, it's going to impact the marriage positively.
Is that Delindo? Or because you said Kindleman?
No, that was Kindleman.
Oh, was it?
Oh,
what does he do?
Father Delindo has something similar. He says, it's about trusting Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus, I trust in you. Take care of everything. Right?
Oh,
Jesus, I
okay.
trust in you.
Oh,
take
so
care
that's
of everything.
okay. I think I get them mixed up sometimes.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, yeah, Father Rotullo Delindo, he is a very holy priest from Italy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think that is true. I think fear, when I'm trying to control, when I'm moving into a power struggle, I think it's usually because I'm fearful that if I don't get my way, then things won't turn out well or
Things will
something.
fall apart.
And it isn't, it's lack of faith in God, and it's also lack of faith in Paul. If I'm arguing with him, right? Or so I think one of the things, when we recognize that we're kind of starting into a power struggle, or feeling kind of like that, I'm going to win this or whatever, to pause, to try, and sometimes it's our bodily, like if we get clenched or something, or just kind of like, or just feel what feeling is that? I'm trying to just, but sometimes when we notice that we're kind of getting ready for battle or something, to pause and say, what am I fearful of? Right? And how can I trust God more in this? And how can I trust my spouse more in this? And then, so I do think that we need to learn to identify fear more, because I think when there's not fear, well, perfect love casts out fear, right? So if I'm close to God and I'm trusting God, then I don't have to be fearful. There's that book that I've mentioned several times by Father Jacques Philippe, called the one about peace.
There's a couple of
Searching
comments
for
on-
and maintaining peace.
There's a couple of
good, let's look.
messages in the chats. What about when the husband is not caring about the children and the wife always needs to choose between serving him and not
Oh.
defending the children?
Good one.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, that's hard because we do, that's very important. Okay, first of all, we do need to defend the children. We do. I mean, if there's harm that's going to be coming to children, we have to defend them.
Right.
And so the church does teach, like, for instance, if there's abuse, whether it's physical or verbal abuse, even towards if children are being gravely harmed, then we do have to defend the children. And so that may have to lead to separation, pulling the children away from. It depends on how intense it is,
That's
right? If it's mild, well, no, then you try to reason with your spouse. But if it's really harming the children must be protected, and so there may have to be a separation. And if he truly is not caring for the children,
and then of course the goal in any separation is reconciliation and healing of the relationship.
Yeah.
And
sometimes sadly it's not possible, but sometimes it is. And so but the prayers go towards that. The prayers and work and striving to heal the marriage and to heal the person who's very wounded. If somebody is really truly not caring for their own children or caring about their children, then there is something that's quite wrong with that person. And it might be a mental illness. It might be a very deep wound that was never dealt with. But if that person is like actually lashing out and or taking out on children have to be protected. So the wife would be remiss to just say, well, I'm not going to worry about the children. I'm going to do what my husband says, because no, in that case, you have to be kind of both the head of the family protecting and also the wife. I mean, you have to kind of play both roles because in a sense, the father has given up his role.
Relinquished his roles.
So that's a very difficult situation.
Yeah. And so then there's the comment here, can power struggle be equal to pride? Absolutely. I mean, it's rooted in pride. And the antidote to that, of course, is humility. And so if you find yourself tending to move into a power struggle, or you pray for humility, pray the litany of humility. Just remember, it's, I'm typing it.
Yeah, you can find it.
Litany of humility.
Yeah, just pray that once a day.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's by Cardinal Raphael
I've never prayed
Mary
once
Deval.
a day. I should pray it once a day.
And it's powerful. Pray the litany of
Well,
humility.
and when you think about it, so this, when I was
misspelled humility.
Okay, they probably know what you mean. So when you think about it, if we go back again to the original sin, both Lucifer, but even I'm talking about Adam and Eve now, that was pride, because it had Eve, as she should have, recognized that God had made her out of Adam as his helpmate, which again, helpmate in the Hebrew word is not a derogatory. It's actually oftentimes God. The word, God is often called the helper.
Yeah,
right?
So the Hebrew term is Ezer, and in the Psalms it often will say God is our Ezer and our help. God is. God is our helper. So it's not derogatory.
Right. So it's saying, but anyways, in Genesis, it says that, that Eve was made out of Adam, that God built her out, he used a rib of Adam's and built her. And she was, this Ezer, this helper. But again, that's a beautiful term. But there is also an order. And there is a sacred order where Adam is supposed to be the head. He is supposed to be the protector. And so Eve did not recognize that. I mean, she just went off on her own.
Also failed too, because
Right.
he didn't protect his wife from the serpent.
So they both failed in that situation. And that was a power struggle, but she was certainly outdone by the serpent, who was very wise and wily. And so he was trying to get humanity over on the bad side, because he had already, out of pride, had already said, I will not serve God. And then he wanted to get Eve and Adam and Eve to do the same thing. And so he did. He got Eve to question God's goodness. And she wasn't humble enough to say, oh, well,
maybe I should ask my husband.
Maybe I should ask my husband, right? Like, I better ask my husband. And so, okay. But again, like Maureen's question about if a husband is deficient in love, that's going to be an issue. So, it's not super easy. This, we can't like solve all of the, because there's different situations, but in general, this power struggles don't move us, in a good position, because it's basically, it's you're being antithetical. Instead of working together, you're being opposed to each other, which isn't moving you ahead in your marriage, or in your raising of your kids, or in your household matters, or in your planning for the future. I mean, if you're at odds and you're saying, I'm right, no, I'm right. Okay, it's rather futile. And sometimes, and people can stay in that for years. Like they can just spend most of their marriage just saying, no, I'm not going to. And no, he was a jerk to me, and I'm never going to forgive him. He has to come begging to me on his knees before I'm going to, right? I mean, so I guess that's lack of forgiveness then. But it can also be a power thing. Like again, it's kind of, I refuse to humble myself. I'm maybe conflating some things here, but this, striving to be on top, striving to win, striving to be the right one. It's human. It's part of our fallen human nature, and it can ruin marriages, and marriages can get very stuck. So what are some ways out? Okay, so the main one we've said so far is humility. So recognizing that I'm not God, and I need to submit to God. So I need to say, okay, God, I might be wrong. Like, I don't think I'm wrong, but I might be wrong. and actually, he might be right. And maybe he has a point. I mean, so these kinds of humbling ourselves and saying, I might be wrong, you might be right, God, my husband might be right, God, or maybe this priest who's telling me something, he might be right, but when we refuse to contemplate the idea that someone might be, that my ideas might be wrong, I'm getting myself into a lot of trouble by pride. Okay, so one important way to move out of power struggles is to pray the prayer of humility and actually start questioning yourself, the litany of humility. And then another way is to be curious and to say, okay, why? Like in your mind, you've got all this A, B, C, D, at least that's the way I do it usually. Like I have all these reasons, and I have all these many, many reasons why my idea is so great.
Can you keep talking while I'm going to find the litany of humility and post it?
Oh, sure.
Will that distract you?
That's okay. And so, so I've got my list of, why this is such a great idea. And I'm thinking that if you don't have a list that kind of counters every single one of those things, then my idea is better. So instead to be curious and say, okay, my idea is quite different from your idea. Would you explain to me, your idea and what the reasons are, and then actually listen to those ideas and consider them seriously. Okay, so that's another way.
Okay, here's the litany of humility.
Okay, we'll go to the humility thing first. Okay, did you post it or?
I did. Oops, it didn't post
It
thing.
didn't work. Did you put it in chat?
Yeah, I did, but I think it's too long for chat.
Oh. Well, oh, I see. Okay, so so it only did it looks like you only got just that others maybe. Oh no, it's there. Except maybe the very end. So anyways, you can, but you know what, it's probably easiest for them anyways,
Yeah,
unless they're
yeah,
going to
that's
copy
right.
it from there.
Yeah.
It is
Well, there's a
powerful
big
prayer.
chunk of it.
Yeah. Okay. You can find it. Okay. So what's another way of dealing with power struggles, getting out of the power struggle? Can you think of one?
Probably sometimes you need to take a little time out, right? So if you're you know, in locked in contention with your spouse, one or both of you may have to call for a timeout so you can just separate for a few minutes and talk it over with the Lord, get your composure back, get your trust back, you know,
Get your peace back.
Get your peace back. Jesus, I trust in you. You know, say a few prayers, and then you'll be able to re-enter the negotiation in a humbler fashion, and not feel like you have to win this one.
That's good.
Yeah.
I do think that's true. I think that it's wise, especially if there's some heat happening inside your soul or between the two of you, to have a bit of a cooling off time and just say, well, we don't have to decide this immediately. Let's, if you can, let's decide, why don't we talk it through tomorrow? And why don't we even, another thing that sometimes helps is just, why don't you write out your reasons and I'll write out mine and we can go through them together. That's another kind of creating more space. So creating more time or more space to work through this struggle that you're having. And it might be something like on how do we discipline our child? Right. And sometimes you do have to decide fairly quickly, but sometimes you do have the leisure of time. Or sometimes it might be, how are we going to spend our money, or how are we going to invest something, or are we going to,
what are we going to do on our vacation?
Yeah, there can be all kinds of things. How are we spending, you know, but power struggle can be just a broader thing too, where it's kind of like the, you know, the comment, like, who wears the pants in the house, right? And a lot of times there is kind of this, like, how often, like one of the questions that Patrick Coffin asked, what do I keep forgetting? Stephanie. He said, how often do you hear the phrase, let me ask the boss, like when it's like, if it's a woman,
yeah.
Does a woman ever say that? Like, oh, let me ask the boss.
Yeah, but
usually it's the men joking amongst themselves, or maybe not joking.
Like, hey, Frankie, come fishing with me. I got to check with the boss.
Right. It's almost always, it's men saying that about the women. Okay. And so, you know, and maybe it's said in kind of a funny kind of way, but I mean, but a lot of times there's, oh, somebody wants to say something. Oh, I thought somebody was going to jump in. Go ahead, Jip. Did you want to say something? Okay, because anybody can jump in here at any point. But I think, you know, you know, there is this cultural tendency, I guess, to see men as, yeah, they just kind of, you know, they need their boss, the wife, right? And the wife really is the one who wears the pants in the family, and she really is the boss. And that is turned upside down, because
it's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And so and it should kind of make us wonder, when we're talking about, like, oh, I don't know about St. Paul's treatment of women. Like, what? He's like, I mean, he called himself the greatest of sinners, but some called him the greatest of the apostles too. I mean, like, he, and certainly the greatest missionary, right? And so if we can't trust him, who can we trust? And he's saying that he's very clearly saying that there's a hierarchy in the family,
It's
and
a sacred order.
a sacred order. And that's what hierarchy means, a sacred order. And again, it's not saying, like, because men and women are created with equal dignity and worth in equality, but that equality has difference.
You're right.
Right, like there's
we're not the
difference.
same. There's
And we have some different roles.
equality, but not likeness, not sameness.
Right.
Yeah.
And
There's
okay.
different roles, different authority.
Okay, now back to how else do we get out of power struggles? Oh man, we're already at time. How did we do that? It's already 8. Well, it depends on where you live. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Okay, what are a few wrapping up? Do you guys have anything to say?
This was a little scattered tonight.
Yeah,
sorry guys.
We were a bit scattered because it was kind of like somewhat about feminism and somewhat about power and somewhat about struggle.
And we got in Blessed Anna Maria T.
Oh yeah, but actually I like that. I think that maybe is what holds it all together. Go ahead, Maureen.
Well, Carol, I was just, I lived a little longer than you, I guess, because when I grew up, it was definitely reversed, and it was not always, positive. And I think that then we went overboard to the women wanted some, respect. And then it went too far. And I guess now we have a great chance to be balanced, especially after we've learned from our mistakes. Thanks.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Maureen. And you know what? It's true. It's definitely true that there have been times, there has been lots of error on the other side too. And I tonight I've been picking on feminism, but obviously there has been a lot of oppression by men.
Yeah.
And when we look again back at the Garden of Eden, we see that conflict began then. That's when oppression began.
Yeah,
That's
and
when
there's ample evidence throughout human history of male oppression. Of
right.
women. Yeah.
So yes, sometimes it's men being jerks, but it's mostly what I remember, and I think I am pretty close to the same age as you, Maureen. But anyways, but I think most of what I've lived up, most of my growing up times, it has been denigration of men. But I think you're right. There's been many times throughout history where women have been treated as chattel, as property, as
inferior.
And that's not the way that God intended it. Neither of those ways. God intended it, and Jesus made that very clear. Matthew 18. Well, both in many ways, and the way he interacted with women. I mean, he made it very clear that there is equal dignity, equal worth, that value. But just as he honored his mother, above all, but he didn't make her an apostle, or a priest. She served him. She was the most powerful and is the most powerful human person. But she doesn't aim for power.
No.
I mean, he's made her powerful, and her humility has made her powerful, right?
Her godliness. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what,
what your sister said. Power is equated with holiness.
Yeah. And so, I guess the other way to deal with our power struggle is to ask God to please help us, to please give us more of those infused virtues of faith, hope, and charity, to beg God for those are infused virtues, and then also to take part in the sacraments where we can receive more of Jesus. So go to Mass, well, obviously every Sunday, but hopefully, a couple other times, or if you can go daily Mass, and get to the sacrament of reconciliation often, and keep a clean slate. And anyways, anytime that we can grow in our faith, anytime we can receive more of God's graces, will help us to grow in holiness. And as we grow closer to our Lord, we will not be as fearful. And when we're not as fearful, we're not going to cling to any little power that we have, or seek more
Right.
power.
Yeah, we do stupid things when we're fearful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and just try to live in constant conversation with our Lord, right? And there's so many good little prayers that you can make up or find and read. You know, like I just posted one here. Oh God, thou art all powerful, make me a saint,
Mhm.
right? Oh, blessed Jesus, give me stillness of soul in thee. Let thy mighty calmness reign in me, rule me. O thou King of gentleness, King of peace. Or here's another good one. My dearest Jesus, teach me to be patient when my heart is troubled all the day long by little but vexatious crosses. I really like that one.
Oh yeah, maybe type that one. That is a
My
good one.
dearest.
Yeah. So yeah, just some of those little prayers, or just Jesus, I trust in you, or just Jesus help, or you like that clapping, Maureen. Yeah, he'll type that one up, because that is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to
dear
say one more thing.
Yeah, good. Do it.
I think that once we understand the complementarity of man and woman, that it's a lot easier to have a relationship that's positive.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if we have the faith and we both believe in it and practice it, that gives us the best chance to have a good marriage. And then if it doesn't work so well, we can have lots to offer up. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you, Maureen, for that. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Oh, my soul, love the love that loves thee from eternity. Oh, my soul, love the love that loves thee from eternity. Yeah, Paul does have a lot of good of these. He finds a lot of these little prayers in the Recolta, which is a book from Tan Publishing. Oh, he was writing down the Recolta. It's 2 C's, I think.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Recolta, which means gathering
Or
of prayers.
collection.
Oh, collection. Okay.
Yeah, or it's gathering.
So yeah, we are at 8 minutes after, so we'll close. But anybody who wants to stay and visit, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions or comments, you can always email us, and if you have ideas about things you'd like us to talk about, we'd like to do that. And thanks for coming, because it's just nice.
It's always nice to hear from you.
Yeah, and you know, we're a small group tonight, but that's totally fine.
Yep. Let's pray.
So, all right.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.